Firefighters and the fire service are under attack. Policies of the coalition government mean that funding to the fire and rescue service and to other public services is being slashed. In the first year of those cuts, we saw 1,500 firefighters' jobs gone forever. Firefighters' pay is under attack, along with millions of other public sector workers. We've already seen 2 years of a pay freeze. Firefighters' pensions are under attack. The government wants us to pay more, work longer and get less at the end of it. The cuts we've already suffered mean that the fire service today is getting to fires and other emergencies slower than it did 10 years ago. And if the cuts continue, that service will only get worse.
What this is about is this government, this coalition government, deciding who's going to pay for the economic crisis. And they've decided that we're going to pay for ordinary working class people. And what they've done is they've made the classic mistake in every recession that if they start cutting public services, it turns a recession into a depression. That's what happened in the 1930s, exactly the same. So they've decided we're going to pay for this crisis with cuts, which means the crisis gets even worse, and then they come back for even more cuts. They've come for our pensions, they've cut wages, they've frozen wages for some workers for the last 3 years since they've been in power. And it's made things worse, because you cut demand in the economy, people stop spending, so the economy goes from a recession into a depression, more people become unemployed, and it's savage, it's absolute savage. You know, in my constituency, we've got people now who've lost all their benefits, because there's no work out there. There are people with disabilities who've gone through assessments that are trying to force them back into work and there's no jobs for them. And so they're suspended from benefit. We've got people now in my area, right across the country as well, living off food parcels because there's no benefits for them. We've got people this winter, we know this winter, we think about 30,000 people will die as a result of cold-related illnesses because they can't afford to turn the heating on. And we've got a large number of young people now, over 1 million, unemployed with no future. That's how bad it's got. But for every cut they make, they deepen the crisis, and then they come back for more.
The coalition government and the way they're actually going about trying to tackle a deficit that the bankers have put us into is destroying the public sector. It's time that they actually turned around and got the bankers to pay for the mistake that they made.
So we shouldn't be taxing the bankers that will more than cater for the money that is being lost.
Cutting firefighters' jobs, cutting teachers, cutting nurses, cutting all those vital services most of us actually rely on simply isn't the answer. All that puts more of us on the dole and means there's less tax receipts coming in. It's a nonsense economy.
This occurred because from Thatcher onwards, including under New Labour, the banks and the speculators were given a free rein. Deregulation of the banks caused speculation, and they started lending to people that couldn't afford to borrow, and at the same time they were cutting people's wages so they couldn't maintain their payments. A debt bubble built up and that eventually burst. The decision was taken then by the government and by the corporations and the rich individuals that the people who will pay for this crisis are not the ones that caused it, they'll be ordinary working people. And the alternative is very, very straightforward. Those people who made the profits in the boom years have got to pay for the crisis. It shouldn't be ordinary working people. They should make sure that they pay their tax. £150 billion a year not paid in taxes because of tax evasion and tax avoidance. We've got to make sure those speculators pay their way as well, so a financial transaction tax, a Robin Hood tax that we've been arguing for. We've got to make sure those who speculated on land don't rip us off with profits, so a land valuation taxation. And we bring all of those things together. We're the 6th richest country in the world. If we got people to pay their way, the wealthiest and the corporations, we could invest that money in putting people back into work, create the jobs we need, invest in our public services, and we get back really to a stable economy. We're at a double-dip recession now. We warned him that if he didn't go for growth in the economy, he did more cuts, it would happen. And we're looking at possibly, and some economists are predicting it now, a Japanese-style depression of up to a decade if he goes on like this. There are people who've been natural Osborne supporters on the Tory backbenchers who've deserted him because he's isolated, because the economic policy that he's pursuing is making things worse rather than better. But he's so, well, I can't describe how pig-headed he is. He sees this as the only way through this crisis, which is making sure working class people pay for it, and not, well, his class, the rich, the wealthy, the corporations. So he's absolutely headstrong, committed to this policy. So far, they've implemented 15% of the cuts. So the bulk of it is now to come, 85%. So we've seen nothing yet. And yet people are on the dole, and the wages cut, pensions threatened, and large numbers of people now being forced into poverty. We think now, on the independent estimates, we could be in a situation where if this continues on, we'll have 2 million additional children living in poverty in this country as a result of these cuts. That's how bad it's got. And that's how bad it will get if they're allowed to continue on. And the way that we can stop it is making sure that we mobilise and make sure these politicians know that we're not willing to accept it anymore. And the October the 20th demonstration is one of the key periods, one of the key activities that we need to undertake now. Mobilise in our hundreds of thousands to get out on the streets on that demonstration so that politicians know that they haven't got a majority in this population for these cuts, and if they continue on, we will bring them down at the next election. It's as simple as that.
Workers from across the public sector and the private sector will be marching in Belfast, in Glasgow and in London at demonstrations attended by hundreds of thousands of ordinary people who are fed up of being asked to pay the price for the bankers' crisis. We would urge FBU members and your families to come along to one of those demonstrations October the 20th and make your feelings known.